What's going on, guys? Before I start, I just want to show you clear gun. Today's video is going to be about the pros and cons of running irons versus red dots. So I just want to start this video by saying that both red dots and iron sights have their pros and cons, and we'll go over all of them in this video. I also want to let you know that this is the first video that I made where I kind of wrote out a script of sort. It's more like a guideline. So if you see me peeking off to the side or reaching for something, that's me going from my notes. So we'll get into it. If you like this kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. Let me know your thoughts on the whole debate going on right now on the internet. And let's jump into it. Pros for having a red dot. You have faster target acquisition. So as soon as you bring it up, you see that dot touches your target, you can shoot, which leads into the next pro, is it's target focused shooting. It's not staring at the front sight, making sure your target behind it's blurry. It's looking at your target, put the dot over your target, pull the trigger. Can't be easier than that. It's way less complex than having to line up the front sight and the rear sight and make sure that you don't disturb them or move them to the left or the right before you go to fire. You just, as soon as that dot flashes on the target, depending on where you are, if it's close up, as soon as that dot flashes on the target, pull the trigger and you're most likely going to hit your mark as long as you're zeroed in properly. It's also great for beginners. I think it's great for beginners to learn trigger manipulation. You'll really be able to tell if you're disturbing the sights pulling the trigger because you'll see that dot move in the window. It's also a great visual indicator for whether or not you're presenting the gun properly and consistently. With sights, with iron sights, it can be a little tough to know if you've perfectly lined up, the front and the rear sights, but with a dot, as soon as you pull it out, you see the dot, you've presented correctly. Now for the cons, I would say the biggest con is battery maintenance. It's got a battery. You have to remember to change that battery. You don't want that battery to be dead when you need it. What I usually see people recommend is that every year on your birthday, change the battery in the red dot, and that way it'll never be dead. I personally would say stay away from red dots with rechargeable batteries, because how many times have you forgotten to recharge your phone? How many times have you forgotten to recharge your watch? Actually, thinking about it, I forgot to charge my watch last night. Now imagine if my watch was my red dot, and imagine if I forgot to charge it and then I was in a situation where I needed to use it and I didn't have co-witnessed iron sights. I'd be fucked. It just wouldn't be a fun time. So yeah, biggest con is that it needs a battery, but the easiest way to get around this is just change it every year on your birthday and try and stay away from dots that have rechargeable batteries. One of the other cons is a lot of them have a shake awake feature that helps them conserve battery when you're not using it, but it'll turn on when you need it. Unfortunately, I've heard of people saying that sometimes their shake awake doesn't function as they expected. They pull the gun out to present, everything feels the same, but there's no dot there, so they shake it a little bit and then it turns on and activates. So I mean, that little bit of lag that could possibly happen could mean the difference between life or death. The window of it can get a little dirty. I know that when I was carrying with the dot regularly, every other day I would do dry fire, and every other day I would pull it out and there'd be a bunch of lint from my shirt or my pants all over the dot. While it's not a huge deal, I feel like if I was in a self-defense situation, it wouldn't really affect it all that much. If you have less than perfect hygiene, then there could be some grease and all sorts of nasty stuff that'll be on that window, and if you go to use it when you need it and you got a greasy, filmy, linty window and you can't see your target, that's not going to be a good day for you. Also, in the same vein, the dot has a brightness setting, and the brightness setting is very closely tied to your environment. So I can tell you that I've gone from situations where midday I'm doing dry fire, it's sunny out, it's bright, we got all the windows open, right? And I can't see that dot because that dot is really dim. Because maybe the night before I was dry firing, it was nighttime, I was in the kitchen, it was just a kitchen light, so it wasn't super bright. So I had to, you know, turn it down. And vice versa. If I was dry firing the night before and I forgot to turn the brightness back up, say I'm outside and it's a sunny day and something happens and I go to look for my dot and I can't see it because it's too dim and the sunlight is washing it out. If I don't have co-witness sights, then I'm fucked. So that's just one other thing to keep in mind if you do decide to run a red dot on your EDC. Make sure you have the brightness set for the environment that you're going to be in. I know a lot of dots nowadays also have auto brightness, and I can tell you that I've used 3 dots that have had auto brightness, and none of them have been like perfect. They're all either too dim or too bright, or they take too long to adjust, and I just wouldn't trust my life with auto brightness. And then a bonus con, if you have astigmatism, if you don't wear glasses, then that little red dot in the middle starbursts, and it makes it a little bit harder to see. I mean, granted, like I said, with red dot, your target focus, you're just looking for a flash on your target. In the long run, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. That's why I added it as a bonus. But just something to be aware of if you have astigmatism and you want to get a dot. I would look into getting a green dot. The green dots are supposed to be a little bit easier on people with astigmatism, and it'll cause you less disturbance when you go to present. All right, now let's get into the FUD talk. Let's get into the iron sights. Now, the biggest advantage to iron sights is that there's no battery ever. They just work. It's an analog aiming system, and it's never gonna fail you. It's always gonna be there. You don't have to worry about like the Shake Awake not working on your iron sights, or like, oh no, the battery died on my iron sights. That'll just never happen to you, and that is honestly something that's fantastic. I'm not biased though. I plan on carrying with a dot once I finish up my 30-day, well, it was 30 days. It now has been extended because I fell off a little bit, but I plan on carrying a dot on my EDC after I get my fundamentals down. Lighting typically doesn't affect it. I will add the caveat that at night, unless you have night sights, it's a little bit harder to see the front sight and line it up with the rear sights. But I don't think it's as glaring of a problem as it is on a red dot or a green dot. I think it's a minor issue on iron sights, whereas I think it's a life or death issue on a dot. And then the other benefit, especially like I said, for new shooters, like I'm a new shooter, the best benefit is typically if you have the iron sights that come with your gun, you don't need to zero them. They're typically zeroed right out of the box. I know with my Glock, the sights were lined up perfectly. I mean, I couldn't verify that because I'm a terrible shot, but I have a friend who was able to go ahead and do pew pew and make sure that it was me and not the gun that was messing up. With a red dot, you have to zero it. If you're not as experienced or you don't have the fundamentals down right, and you don't have someone else zero the dot for you, it could be off and you would never know. Just because your trigger pull is inconsistent or your grip is inconsistent and you've zeroed it with inconsistencies. Whereas with OEM sights, that's not going to happen. Now, iron sights are not without their cons. They do have their problems, I will say. There is downsides to them. One of them being, as you get older and your eyes get worse, it makes it harder to focus on the front sight. It's harder to see the sight, to line them up properly, and then to also hit the target behind it. Because when you were young, what used to be a kind of defined blur is now like a blob that's, you know, just mutated in front of this other blurry post that you're trying to line up on this blob, and you're trying to also line up this blurry post with this homogeneous thing in the back of the gun that has a little bit of light through it. I can tell you, I have bad eyes, and I've attempted to dry fire a couple times without wearing my glasses, and doing it with iron sights is much harder than doing it with a red dot. Another con is this: it could be a steep learning curve for beginners. It's tough to wrap your mind around the idea of focus on the front sight, don't focus on your target, and then line the front and the rear sight up. And then, on the flip side of what I said earlier about the iron sights already being zeroed from the factory, sometimes, a lot of times, they don't tell you what the holdover is. So the factory could have zeroed your sights for 25 yards. You're shooting at a target that's 7 yards in front of you, and you're wondering, why am I not hitting the bullseye? You got to figure out your holdover. So that could be another thing that could hold beginners back. Typically that's easy to diagnose, especially if the groups are pretty consistent, but that's neither here nor there. There's a steeper learning curve for new shooters when trying to figure out iron sights. And another reason for that is there's less visual feedback if you're messing up. I think that the larger movements or the more prominent movements of the red dot when you're disturbing the trigger is more helpful than the possible small movements on iron sights. You could think that you have it lined up perfectly, but maybe there's a slightly larger gap on the right side than the left side. Maybe the thing that you're supposed to line up isn't the top of the post, but maybe it's like the little dot in the middle of the post, and you don't know that until you figure that out, or someone coaches you through it and helps you figure out what's going on. So I think the lesser feedback on making errors could be a detriment to new shooters and possibly instill bad habits in them. And then the only other con I would say is low light self-defense situations could be a little tricky unless you have night sights. It's tough. On my Glock, I blacked out the rear sights. So really all I have is just a little white dot that I'm looking for. And I know where that white dot should be, but again, if it's the middle of something goes bump in the night and I go out with my gun to go, handle a threat that's in my house, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to manage that situation with iron sights than it would as if I had my red dot on my gun. So in conclusion, both aiming modalities have their ups, they have their downs, they have their pros, they have their cons. What I would recommend any new shooter, or any shooter in general, you don't have to be new to take this advice, pick something that you like and practice with it. If you really like using a red dot and you think that the pros outweigh the cons, throw a red dot on your EDC, go to the range, throw some lead downrange. Get good with it, man. Practice with it. Work on your presentation. Make it so it's flawless. So if that day comes, when you train and you're in a stressful situation, you fall back on your lowest level of training. So if your lowest level of training with a red dot is being able to present the gun properly, get the dot on target, and pull the trigger, that is the best case scenario. And then same thing with iron sights. If you really find that you just don't like red dots, if you're just against them for whatever reason, you think they suck, you think they're the worst thing ever invented, you think they're another fad, and you just want to stick with your irons, do it. Practice with it. Get good with your irons. Make sure that when you present your gun, your iron sights are lined up and you're ready to take that shot when your life depends on it. But again, I'll add the caveat. Don't neglect the other modality. So you choose to do red dot, still do some iron shooting. Make sure your red dot has co-witness iron sights, so that way if it does fail, you have a backup. And then make sure you're decent with that backup. At the very least, you want to be able to present and then quickly switch from one to the other and get a shot on target. I would say that's the bare minimum if you plan on using a red dot. Co-witnessed iron sights, and make sure that you are quick enough with transitioning from red dot to iron sights should the red dot fail. And I think if you practice those things and you follow that advice, I think that you'll be an amazing shooter. And it doesn't matter if someone tells you, oh, you're a fucking FUD, you only use iron sights, da 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 da, get with the future, old man. Whatever. I'm good with irons. Or if someone's looking at you and they're like, oh, you fucking alien technology you got on your gun, you just got to line a dot up and, you know, your parallax and all this other shit, then you can tell them I'm good with my red dot. So yeah, when it comes down to it, I don't think that there's strong arguments in either direction. I think the biggest part of this puzzle that, to give credit to everyone that I've heard talk about it, they do mention it. Just train with what you like. That's the biggest part of this. Train. It doesn't matter if you're team red dot, team iron sights. Be team training. Get good with what you have. That's it. That's all I got today. I'm out.